In November 2023, Las Vegas spent $500 million to let Formula One drive through its streets for 3 days. The race generated headlines worth $1.5 billion in economic impact. Politicians took victory laps. F1 called it the biggest sporting event in city history. But if you walked just 2 blocks away from the Strip that weekend, you'd find something the press releases didn't mention. Small business owners who'd lost everything. Restaurants that went dark because road closures cut them off from customers for months. Construction workers who built the track, then watched the profits leave town on private jets. The champagne flowed, the tax revenue rolled in. And somewhere in the fine print, the city signed away more than it gained. This is the story Formula One doesn't want you to hear. Not because it's false, but because it's complicated. And in that complexity lies a very simple question. Who actually profits when a city hosts the fastest sport on Earth? Here's how the pitch sounds when Formula One comes to your city. Global exposure, hundreds of millions of television viewers, an economic multiplier effect that will transform your downtown into a destination, tourism dollars flowing in like water, infrastructure investments that will benefit residents for decades, jobs, prestige, a permanent place on the world stage. And all you have to do is pay between $25 and $60 million per year, sometimes more. That's the hosting fee, the price Formula One charges for the privilege of bringing 20 of the world's most expensive cars to race through your streets. Azerbaijan pays $57 million annually. Qatar pays $55 million. Saudi Arabia about the same. Even Monaco, with all its history and glamour, now pays $30 million after doubling its fee in recent contract negotiations. Las Vegas is the exception. Liberty Media, F1's owner, actually runs that race themselves, investing $500 million into permanent infrastructure. It's not charity, it's a bet that owning both sides of the deal will prove more profitable than just collecting fees. But for every other city, the math starts with a check written to Formula One before a single car turns a wheel. The hosting fee only gets you in the door. Then you pay to build or modify the track. Bahrain spent $150 million. Abu Dhabi spent $1.3 billion creating Yas Marina from scratch. Singapore spends tens of millions each year setting up and dismantling its street circuit. Korea spent $264 million building a track in the middle of marshland 200 miles from Seoul. You pay for grandstands, safety barriers, lighting systems that can illuminate night racing, medical facilities, team hospitality zones, security, police, emergency services, traffic management. And here's the part that makes the deal particularly lopsided. Formula One keeps almost everything else. Global broadcasting rights? F1's. Trackside sponsorship revenue? F1's. Merchandising? Also F1's. The city gets ticket sales, local concessions, hotel tax revenue if visitors actually stay and spend. That's the return on an investment that can easily exceed $100 million in the first year alone. Cities know this. They sign anyway, because the pitch includes something harder to quantify: prestige. Let's talk about Korea. In 2010, South Korea's government believed they were buying a future. The Korea International Circuit in Yanggam would host 7 years of Formula One, with an option to extend through 2021. An entire city would grow around the track. Tourism would boom. The country's automotive industry would gain global credibility. The track opened just 13 days before the first race, barely scraping an FIA approval rating of satisfactory. Cranes still littered the infield. Mud provided most of the runoff areas. It rained. It rained hard. 4 races happened, then silence. Attendance was dismal. The track was too far from any major population center. The promised development never materialized because changing the land use designation required $7 million that organizers no longer had. By 2013, losses were approaching $26 million per year. Bernie Ecclestone, F1 CEO at the time, publicly said he didn't want to return to poor Korea. The race was dropped from the 2014 calendar. The circuit still exists, hosting occasional domestic events. The debt remains too. As of 2022, approximately $115 million in F1-related debt sat on the books of the Jeonnam Development Corporation. The empty grandstands rust. Vegetation reclaims the asphalt. Korea is not alone. India's Buddha International Circuit hosted 3 races between 2011 and 2013 before tax disputes and financial insustainability killed the event. The circuit sat abandoned until MotoGP returned in 2023. Years of potential use lost. Vietnam built an entire street circuit in Hanoi for a race that never happened. The 2020 debut was canceled due to COVID. It never rescheduled. Corruption investigations into local officials added another layer of disaster. The infrastructure exists, the race does not. These aren't edge cases, they're warnings. Even circuits that survive often struggle. Silverstone, home of the British Grand Prix and one of F1's most historic venues, has threatened to drop the race multiple times due to financial pressure. Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium has been on and off the calendar, unable to consistently justify the cost. Monza, the Cathedral of Speed, negotiated hard to reduce its fees after years of losses. The pattern repeats: initial optimism, mounting costs, disappointing returns, and a reckoning. But some races thrive. Singapore ran profitably for years, bringing in 450,000 additional visitors who spent $1.4 billion in the local economy over a decade. Austin's Circuit of Americas generates substantial economic activity and has become a cultural anchor for the city. Miami's race produced over $1 billion in economic impact across its first 3 years. So what separates success from catastrophe? Location matters. Cities with existing tourism infrastructure absorb F1 better than cities building from scratch. Singapore, Las Vegas, Miami, Abu Dhabi. These are places people already visit. The race becomes another reason to come, not the only reason. Street circuits have an advantage. Temporary tracks built on existing roads avoid the sunk cost of a permanent facility that sits empty 360 days a year. The infrastructure benefits the city whether F1 returns or not. Private investment changes everything. When Stephen Ross privately funded much of Miami's circuit and Liberty Media bankrolled Las Vegas, the risk shifted away from taxpayers. The public still pays through road closures and disruption, but the financial exposure is vastly different. And crucially, realistic expectations. Cities that view F1 as a long-term brand investment rather than an immediate cash cow tend to navigate the economics more successfully. The return isn't always monetary. Sometimes it's positioning your city as a global destination. Sometimes it's the political capital of hosting a world-class event. But those are the exceptions proving a larger rule. Let's return to Las Vegas. The official numbers look spectacular. The 2023 race generated $1.5 billion in economic impact. The 2024 race generated $934 million. Tax revenue totaled $77 million in year 1, $54 million in year 2. Those are real dollars flowing into state and local government coffers, funding schools and public services. But those headline figures mask deeper complexity. The $1.5 billion includes Liberty Media's own infrastructure spending. It counts the full construction budget, employee wages, visitor spending, and the ripple effects through the economy. It's a legitimate economic impact. It's also heavily weighted by one-time costs that won't recur. By the second year, when the construction was complete and the novelty had worn off, the impact dropped by nearly 40%. Still impressive, but trending in a concerning direction. And then there are the costs nobody puts in a press release. Small businesses near the track were blocked off for months during construction. Some sued, seeking compensation for lost revenue. Clark County staff logged 25,000 hours preparing for the race. Bus routes were detoured, creating hour-long delays for 25,000 daily riders. Residents couldn't access their own neighborhoods without navigating a maze of barricades. One local restaurant owner put it simply, "We don't really notice a real impact because the business isn't recognized by Formula One. We haven't received any contracts or any advertising. We haven't even been advertised." The economic boom was real. It just didn't reach everyone. Luxury hotels thrived. High-end restaurants printed money. Private jet services and yacht charters did spectacular business. But the neighborhood taqueria 2 miles away closed for the weekend because nobody could reach it. This is what economists call revenue leakage. Money enters the local economy, but it concentrates in specific sectors and often flows right back out. A tourist books a room at the Bellagio, an MGM property, eats at a celebrity chef's restaurant, part of a national chain, rents a car from an international company, flies home on a private jet based in Los Angeles. The dollars touched Vegas. Many didn't stay. Miami tells a similar story with a twist. The race has generated over $1 billion in economic impact across 3 years and secured a contract extension through 2041. On paper, it's a massive success. Attendance topped 275,000 in 2024. Visitor spending averaged $1,940 per person, nearly double the typical tourist. But in Miami Gardens, the neighborhood actually hosting the race, residents have a different perspective. The city negotiated a $5 million community benefits package when F1 arrived in 2022. 4 years later, only $1.07 million has been spent. STEM programs received sporadic funding. Beautification projects got inconsistent support. Local businesses report minimal benefit. Of the 15 restaurants featured as vendors in 2025, only 4 were owned by Miami Gardens residents. The money exists, the distribution remains uneven. This isn't unique to F1. Mega events routinely promise broad economic benefits while delivering concentrated gains. The Super Bowl, the Olympics, the World Cup, they all follow similar patterns. The difference is scale and frequency. F1 returns every single year. The promises compound. So do the disappointments. So why do cities keep signing these deals? The answer has less to do with economics than politics. A mayor who brings Formula One to their city gets to stand on a stage with global celebrities, cut ribbons in front of international media, and claim credit for putting their city on the map. That photo op has value, not financial value, political value. It's the same reason cities bid for the Olympics, despite decades of evidence showing they rarely profit. The games themselves might lose money, but the politician who secured them gets re-elected. Formula One understands this perfectly. They're not selling a race, they're selling a narrative. The narrative that your city belongs in the same conversation as Monaco, Singapore, Abu Dhabi. The narrative that you're a player on the global stage. The narrative that big things happen here. For some cities, that narrative is worth the price. Qatar doesn't need an economic return on its $55 million annual fee. The country is using F1 as part of a larger sports washing strategy, burnishing its international reputation ahead of the 2022 World Cup and beyond. The race is a line item in a national branding campaign measured in decades, not quarters. Saudi Arabia operates from a similar playbook, spending aggressively on F1, golf, soccer, and boxing to reshape its global image. The financial return is beside the point. The goal is soft power. But not every city has unlimited resources or geopolitical ambitions. Las Vegas is a special case because F1 owns the race, aligning incentives in unusual ways. Miami works because private investment from Stephen Ross shifted risk away from taxpayers, and the city already had the infrastructure to absorb hundreds of thousands of visitors. Austin succeeds because Texas has no income tax, and the Circuit of the Americas operates as a private venue, booking non-F1 events year-round. Most cities don't have those advantages. They face the standard deal: massive upfront costs, annual fees that escalate 5% per year, limited revenue control, and a prayer that tourism will offset the losses. The prayer doesn't always get answered. What F1 has mastered is extracting maximum value from the desperation of cities competing for prestige. When Bahrain, Abu Dhabi, and Qatar are all bidding for Middle Eastern races, F1 can play them against each other, driving fees higher. When the United States suddenly wants 3 races, F1 can demand premium terms. The calendar is limited, demand is high. The leverage belongs entirely to Liberty Media. And Liberty Media, as a for-profit entertainment company, has a fiduciary duty to maximize that leverage. The result is a system where F1 takes very little risk and cities absorb almost all of it. F1 provides the cars, the teams, the broadcast infrastructure, and the global marketing. Cities provide the venue, the funding, the local services, and the hope that it all works out. When it does work out, F1 shares in the upside through future fee increases and contract renewals.
When it doesn't, cities are left holding the debt and the empty grandstands. Here's what the original video got right. Formula One's business model systematically transfers risk from itself to the cities desperate to host it. Here's what it didn't say. Sometimes that risk is worth taking. Las Vegas will likely break even or profit over time because Liberty Media is directly invested and because the city's entire economy is built on spectacle. Miami is working because private money absorbed the hardest costs and the city has infrastructure to spare. Austin succeeds because Texas has no income tax and the Circuit of the Americas operates as a private venue booking non-F1 events year-round. Most cities don't have those advantages. They face the standard deal: massive upfront costs, annual fees that escalate 5% per year, limited revenue control, and a prayer that tourism will offset the losses. The prayer doesn't always get answered. What F1 has mastered is extracting maximum value from the desperation of cities competing for prestige. When Bahrain, Abu Dhabi, and Qatar are all bidding for Middle Eastern races, F1 can play them against each other, driving fees higher. When the United States suddenly wants 3 races, F1 can demand premium terms. The calendar is limited, demand is high. The leverage belongs entirely to Liberty Media. And Liberty Media, as a for-profit entertainment company, has a fiduciary duty to maximize that leverage. The result is a system where F1 takes very little risk and cities absorb almost all of it. When it does work out, F1 shares in the upside through future fee increases and contract renewals. When it doesn't, cities are left holding the debt and the empty grandstands. Here's what the original video got right. Formula One's business model systematically transfers risk from itself to the cities desperate to host it. Here's what it didn't say. Sometimes that risk is worth taking. Las Vegas will likely break even or profit over time because Liberty Media is directly invested and because the city's entire economy is built on spectacle. Miami is working because private money absorbed the hardest costs and the city has infrastructure to spare. Austin succeeds because Texas has no income tax and the Circuit of the Americas operates as a private venue booking non-F1 events year-round. Most cities don't have those advantages. They face the standard deal: massive upfront costs, annual fees that escalate 5% per year, limited revenue control, and a prayer that tourism will offset the losses. The prayer doesn't always get answered. What F1 has mastered is extracting maximum value from the desperation of cities competing for prestige. When Bahrain, Abu Dhabi, and Qatar are all bidding for Middle Eastern races, F1 can play them against each other, driving fees higher. When the United States suddenly wants 3 races, F1 can demand premium terms. The calendar is limited, demand is high. The leverage belongs entirely to Liberty Media. And Liberty Media, as a for-profit entertainment company, has a fiduciary duty to maximize that leverage. The result is a system where F1 takes very little risk and cities absorb almost all of it. The only reason Formula One bankrupts cities is because it bankrupts them through indifference. F1 optimizes for its own growth and profitability. Whether cities succeed or fail is largely their problem. The other uncomfortable truth: some cities know this and sign anyway, because the calculus isn't purely financial. It's political, symbolic, aspirational. It's about what kind of city you want to be, even if the math doesn't quite work. The question isn't whether Formula One bankrupts cities. The question is whether cities are making that choice with their eyes open, or whether they're being sold a fantasy that evaporates the moment the checkered flag drops. Next time you watch a race, pay attention to the skyline behind the track. Ask yourself who built it. Ask yourself who paid for it. Ask yourself whether the people who live there got what they were promised, or just what they were sold. Because somewhere between the champagne and the podium, there's an invoice, and somebody always has to pay it.